Hello, and welcome to Speaking of Supply Chain, where we explore trends, current events, and innovations impacting the logistics and supply chain industries. I'm your host, Ellen Wood. I am joined today by Sascha Kaczmarek, one of the founders of Motion Miners, and we are going to be talking about process optimization and wearable technology that supports these initiatives. Welcome, Sascha.
Hi, Ellen. Nice to meet you. Really looking forward to the podcast.
Fantastic. I think we have a great conversation today because wearables and like the telemetry that we can get from these is so interesting. I can't wait to hear more about it. So on to our conversation today, which is about wearable technology and the innovations that have come about that use this technology not just for personal information. I know lots of people are familiar with the Apple Watch, the Fitbit. There are lots of trackers. I wear one. And some of the things that we're able to capture about our own health and wellness as we go about our day. I know I had a very busy weekend this past weekend, and on Saturday I was doing yard work and I ended up walking over 16,000 steps that day, which is a really big day for me. And I certainly felt it the next day. So how are businesses trying to use this and use this in a commercial application? What's going on?
Yeah, you mentioned it totally right. So in the B2C context, the focus is definitely on your health data, improving your fitness, and maybe also to have an easier life by connecting it to your mobile devices for easier handling of your messages and calls and so on. So this is usually the focus if you're wearing the Apple Watches, the other smartwatches and fitness trackers and so on. But using wearables in a B2B context is a little bit different because in this context it is not interesting to understand what a certain employee, for example, is doing the whole day, but it's more for a use to understand how processes works. For example, in production or logistics, because in many different production and logistics systems, you have a lot of manual processes and you do not know what is really happening on the shop floor. And if your processes are, for example, inefficient or unergonomic, then you will lose a lot of money, of course. And with the help of industrial wearables, which look a little bit different than commercial wearables, you are able to analyze this manual shop floor processes in an automated way. And by this, you can find potentials to improve on the one side the efficiency or the ergonomics. So if you compare to B2C, the focus is more on the process, not on the person, especially because of the data security laws in different countries, because you are not allowed to understand what a certain person is doing in your processes. And from a technical point of view, the wearables are quite similar from the technical point, what is inside. So you have this gyroscope, you have this accelerometer sensor inside, and by how the sensor is moving, you understand which process took place currently. But the disadvantage of commercial wearables currently is that they try to save battery lifetime because you want to use them over a week if possible, and therefore they do not store the data often enough on the devices itself, but we need a lot of data to do this process analysis in an industrial field. So they are the difference, and this is the reason why we cannot just use a smartwatch, an Apple Watch, or a fitness tracker to do this industrial use cases, which we are currently doing.
Okay, so focusing on some of these industrial wearables, you said they're not the same; they're very different. So a watch wearable or a watch type wearable that would go on the wrist is one thing because of the motion that's needed to track. What other components are there to these wearables?
Yeah, for example, what we need at least 3 wearables. So one on each wrist and one at the belt, because one is currently not enough to do this activity recognition. We have different machine learning algorithms who are able to do these activity recognition algorithms. And to have a good valid database in the end, we need at least 3 sensors. There are also some other companies which are using some sensor suits with a lot of more sensors to get much more deeper insights into your processes. But unfortunately, if you have to wear a sensor suit with at 30 degrees Celsius over 2 or 3 weeks, it's not that cool for your employees. So this is the reason why we're focusing on 3 sensors. And what we use in additional are so-called Bluetooth beacons. And these Bluetooth beacons are used to create an indoor localization system. This is important to understand where the process took place, because we cannot use the GPS signal in a warehouse or in a production system because we are inside. So this is the issue, that we need extra hardware to get this indoor localization system.
So what kinds of data do you capture? You mentioned having, process data, but in terms of what these wearables are capturing about like space and movement and speed, what kinds of things are you looking for, and what can you do with that information?
Yeah. So the raw data itself is just information about acceleration and how the movement looks like by the gyroscope. And then we have an algorithm who's able to understand if this data looks like walking, standing, driving, handling things, bending, pushing, pulling a cart, or carrying a carton, and so on. So we trained the algorithm to understand how sensor data looks like if you move in a certain way. And this is the base activity data which we are focusing on. And then in addition to that, we have this localization data based off the Bluetooth beacon signal, which is gathered by these sensors for the information about where the process took place. And what we then do is we can combine the two worlds together. So we use the activity data and we use the location data and create KPIs out of it. For example, we have the KPIs like waiting time, the number of congestions or the congestion times, the walking or driving times, the walking distance, the number of bending movements, and so on and so on. So we try to get these KPIs, which you usually have together if you use manual process studies like stopping this times with a time stopper. This is what we try to get out automatically out of the sensor data. And then based on the sensor data, the process engineer or the industrial engineer is able to understand the process much more better, to see where bottlenecks in my systems, where can I improve the ergonomics, for example, for my employees, and then to think about optimization measures, which can then be implemented into the process.
So do certain industries have more interest in this type of data or technology, or is it more just function based, where it's, a more manual operation, a more manual warehouse or production, something of that nature? Does it cross industries, or are there certain industries that this is very popular right now?
Yeah, it is cross industries, definitely. But we always say industries are good for the technology which have a lot of sites with a lot of manual processes, with a lot of employees which are still doing the hard work every day. And there we can help them with the technology. So, for example, our main companies are from the field of logistics service providers like DHL or DB Schenker, for example. Or from the retail companies in Germany, for example, like Lidl, or in the US, hopefully in the future, Walmart. So this is comparable. But we have also customers from the field of manufacturing, automotive suppliers, or the automotive company itself. So we always say everywhere where manual processes take place, there we try to help with our technology. Sometimes we have really exotic questions which pop up from customers. We had some, I would say, POCs in hospitals where we analyze hospital processes. Also quite interesting to see. So I think there are no limitations. What is important in the end is that we can deliver something what will help, or which will help the customer to improve their processes in the end.
So when it comes to some of these processes, is it only about ergonomics, or is it about actually improving and optimizing maybe their workflows, or what is the impetus that gets companies interested in this type of data gathering? Because that's what this is. This is gathering data to try to solve something. What are they usually trying to solve?
Yeah, most of the time it's both, but the most companies, of course, would like to see how they can improve their processes regarding the efficiency. So how we can set up leaner processes, how we can create more output with my team, which I currently have, because by this they can save money in the end or earn more money. This is often the most important part for them. But the
Obviously.
yeah, but the good thing is that based on the same data, without doing an additional analysis, we can do it in the same time, or we can do an economic analysis at the same time. So we have a win-win-win situation. We have a win situation for the company or for our client because they can save money. We have a win situation for the employee itself because we can try to improve their ergonomics. And on our side, we have also a win situation because we earn a little bit of money. So there's this win-win-win situation in the end.
Sure. So what type of ergonomic situations are usually able to be resolved? I know we have an initiative going on in our office right now where we're trying to make sure that the ergonomics are right, that everybody's chair is the right height and the distance from their computer and their desk. And we have
Yeah.
standing options and sitting options and lots of different ways to make sure that we are all, appropriately, I don't even know, just positioned to do our work most efficiently, but also that's for a health and wellness, aspect. So what types of things are we able to, in an industrial situation,
Yeah.
improve in terms of those ergonomics?
Yeah. So this is, of course, a little bit different if you compare to your office processes. What we often see in, for example, inbound processes, that they have to handle a lot of goods in a bended position because there are no solutions to lift things up, for example. Or if we are in a picking process, we often analyze how often they pick something over the head and in a bended position. And then we think about if we can restore the articles in the warehouse so that the a runner, so the goods which are sold the most, that they are in the ergonomic zone, so that they don't have to pick in an bended position anymore, or on a position where they have to go with their arms over the head. This is what we are focusing on, and also the distance which is traveled through the system. Because in a lot of projects, you can imagine, definitely in picking processes like at Amazon, for example, they travel a distance about 20 kilometers a day. And this is, from an economic point of view, not that good. On the other side, standing the whole day is also not good. And then you have to think about how, yeah, that's right. And then you have to think about if you can use job rotation, for example. And by this, you can reduce the strain for the employees, and you have a much more better process for them. And hopefully they will be much more healthier in the future.
Wonderful. Well, and so along with that ergonomic portion of it, so making sure that your employees are working safely and not straining themselves and taking the breaks or rotating the shifts like you were mentioning to make sure that they are not loading all of that activity onto their day and taking rests and things like that. So what does that mean in terms of those processes that those companies have? Because that would be a big change that they have to do if they have to say,
Yeah.
okay, well, they can't pick something else up off the floor. That's too much of a strain, or they can't take a heavy item, down from above their head. That's unsafe. Or this repetitive motion that they're doing for 8 hours a day is too much. It needs to be in a shift of 4 hours, and then they switch to a different activity. So how complicated does it get to change those processes after the
Yeah.
fact and reimagine how their business is going to function once they realize that perhaps this is too hard on the employees' physical bodies?
Yeah. What our clients definitely have to do is they have to invest something after such an analysis, but they are open to invest something because otherwise they wouldn't do an analysis with us together or do it by themselves with our technology. So often after we analyze the data, we have really small quick wins, so quite simple things which can improve the process directly. For example, one use case was at a logistics service provider. There we saw in data that the employees had to walk a really long distance to a certain central printer. I don't know how many kilometers a year if you scale it up over 20 employees per shift. And then we offered a quite simple solution for them. Just buy 10 more small printers, put them at their working desk, and then they don't have to travel anymore to this central printer, so that we can reduce the strain by walking this distance. And in fact, in the same time, we improve the efficiency because it saves, of course, a lot of time. So it's then both again. But sometimes it's a little bit more complicated, of course. When we see data, when we see something like the picking algorithm is not that good, or the storage algorithm is not that good, then you have to improve something maybe in your WMS system. And this is sometimes a little bit more effort for the IT guys, and it's cost a little bit more of money to implement it. Or if we see in data that it makes sense to use exoskeletons, for example. And you can imagine if you roll out exoskeletons for your 100 employees in a warehouse, it costs also a lot of money. And the payback regarding efficiency is often later, maybe after 5 or 10 years, because you cannot see it in data after 1 or 2 years, because the health data is provable after roughly 5 to 10 years, and then you can see if you have the payback or not.
So you've mentioned a couple instances, short snippets about what customers have been able to achieve or understand about their operations. Do you have just like an overall success story that tells more about like the scale of improvements that companies can do? So when they're trying to make improvements, they're trying to find those efficiencies and reduce their costs, improve their output. What's your best customer success story?
Yeah, so there's a quite new story. I think the project was from this year, where we did a process analysis at a fashion e-commerce company, and there we analyzed their picking process. And the process took place in a 5-level racking system, so quite a huge system with about 25 employees per level. So it was really a huge warehouse. And the goal was definitely to increase the efficiency and at the same time, the ergonomics for the employees. And what we did there was we analyzed the process for 2 weeks, because after 2 weeks, we had enough valid data. In this 2 weeks, we gathered over 1 year of process data, which no one will do if you do it manually. So no one is running behind an employee 1 year, because that costs too much money. For example, what we found out in this data was that we had that we have many long searching times for articles, for example, because of the WMS system, how it was set up. We had long walking distances. Sometimes they visit an aisle twice. So this was also not good implemented in their WMS system. And what we also saw in the data was that we had many unergonomic pick processes, and in addition to that, many clarification cases. And this means that sometimes they have some issues, for example, that they couldn't find the article, or that the article wasn't on stock anymore. And in this case, or in the baddest case, they had to go down from the 5th level to the low ground level, and then go to the shift leader, ask the shift leader what they can do, and then they had to go back to the 5th level. And this, of course, cost a lot of time to clear the clarification case. And this is something we saw in data later on. And based on this data and the results, we have developed several optimization measures. For example, such measures like using a ProGlove hand scanner to reduce the picking times, or use a narrow picking cart, so a smaller cart for the picking process, to avoid congestions in their processes, because the aisles were really small or really tight. And for example, what we also saw, that it would definitely make sense for the customer to think about a better routing strategy in their WMS system, because there we had the biggest improvement, but of course also the biggest investment, because then you need the SAP guys who are working on the algorithm again and so on. And what we saw later, after calculating the saving potentials, was that we could save for that customer about 300,000 euros. So currently also $300,000 per year. And at the same time, we improved the ergonomics by different measures by 20%. So this was quite a good project for our customer.
Significant. And that was just in one of their facilities.
That's one facility, yeah. And then what you can see if you have best practices and roll it out to the other facilities, and then you save again 300,000 at the other side. So quite simple.
Right. If you're gonna change up your WMS system and reprogram some things, you might as well
Yeah.
make these changes system wide and make sure that all of your employees are benefiting from the information that was gleaned at that one site. Well, and that brought up another question to me. So as you're going through, you're collecting the data. Obviously, Motion Miners is the company that has the wearables that does this. But then when it comes to those suggestions or those potentials for changing those processes, do you also walk with the client through that process of this is what you need to do instead? Or is it just this is where there's a problem, it needs fixed, here are a couple solutions? But how long does that engagement last with Motion Miners in terms of coming up with all of these KPIs and these new processes that are going to be much leaner and much more efficient?
Yeah. So currently we have two business cases. On the one side, we do consultancy for our customers. So we set up the system, analyze the data, interpret the data, and we create these optimization measures for them. And sometimes we also start the, I would say, rough process planning and how to implement the new organizational measures or the technical measures. But what we often do not do is something like a fine planning of the system, or we do not help them by realize all the things, because we are not the logistic planners. We are a process optimization company. And if our customers or clients would like to implement all the things which we suggest to them, then we have partners for that one who will help them with that. And on the other side, our most of the time bigger clients can also or will also license our technology. So there's a yearly license model behind it, so they can license our hardware and software. Then we train them, and then they can analyze their processes totally by themselves. And we help them also to understand the data and to understand how they have to interpret this data to come to an optimization potential. And this is also possible. And in this case, we have a customer success team which just help them a little bit. But in fact, we try to onboard them so that they can do everything by themselves.
What is the reaction from these employees on, in these companies, on these production or warehouse floors? Are they open to the concept of being tracked and looking for improvements? Are they hesitant? Do they push back on it? Is there much change management that needs to happen in terms of getting buy-in for this study?
Yeah. This is one of the most important part when we start a project with a customer, that we will be, or that we are as much as transparent as possible, so that we explain to the employees and maybe also to the unions. In Germany, you have these, I don't know if you understand the word, the Betriebsrat, it's the German word. And this is really important for them, that they understand what we are doing, why we are doing it, and what we are not doing and not allowed to do because of data security laws. Because there are a few things that we are not allowed to do, for example, analyzing times when they are doing a break, or when they smoke a cigarette, or going to the toilet, for example. And these are the concerns they have, and this is typically change management, what we have to do. And we are really well trained in how to handle these issues. And one of the most important point is that we have this data security or data legal opinion, which also confirms that in the way how we do this motion mining analysis, that we are totally compliant, especially here in Europe, with the GDPR laws, which are, I would say, the most of the hardest laws regarding data anonymization and data security laws and so on. And this is what we deliver, a solution where you cannot see later on in the data from which employee the data comes from. This is really important. You are not allowed to see that Mrs. Miller, for example, created this waiting or walking time. This is not allowed. What we are only allowed to do is to create process data in the end. And this is something you really have to explain to the employees. Yeah.
So then they know that this information is being collected based on function and that employee function, not that employee specifically.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
interesting. And are you currently only working in Europe? Are you global? Do you work in North America? Africa, Asia? Where is Motion Miners able to support clients right now?
Yeah, I would say we can help them everywhere on the world. But of course, we started in Germany and Europe. This was the easiest start for us. We had one project last year in Mexico at an automotive supplier. We have one licensed customer in Malaysia, for example. And we will start this year to focus more on the North American market. So I myself, I will be in the US from beginning mid of October to the end of November, because there's a trade fair, industrial transformation is it called, I think in Indianapolis.
Industrial transformation. It is
correct.
here in Indianapolis this year.
Yeah, right. So currently we are talking to the city of Dortmund, which will support us to get over the big sea and participate at this fair. And then hopefully we can participate also in this German accelerator. This is a program for startups, which will start in the US. And then I will be on site for 4 to 6 weeks. And if some of our listeners now is interested to meet me, he can just give me a call or write me an email, and then I will do on-site appointments. This is also no problem.
Fantastic. Well, now our listeners know where to get more information about Motion Miners. So obviously there's your website. You will be in Indianapolis this fall. So we will have to make plans to grab a coffee together, because that is only a couple blocks from where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
That's so exciting that you'll be coming to North America. I'm sure our listeners will be interested, and we can certainly direct them to where you will be. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much, Sascha, for telling us more about this wearable technology and what it can accomplish for companies, whether it is a 3PL or a fashion house, or, just a warehouse or a production facility, that they can get some of these optimizations and improvements in their organization, both from a process standpoint, but also ergonomically for their employees, to make sure that their employees are safe and healthy on the job. I hope our listeners enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. If any of you out there have a suggestion for a topic or would like to be a guest on our show, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. You can contact me at podcast@mebach.com anytime.